A wall built from firewood has kept a Wisconsin family warm through 140 winters. It insulates better than fiberglass. It resists fire better than wood framing. And the organization that writes your building code has never examined it, not once in its entire history. The wall is not banned. It is not restricted. It simply does not exist in the document that decides what 330 million Americans are allowed to build. 1,000 years of proven construction, exposed to the worst winters the Northern Hemisphere produces. Treat it as if no one ever stacked a log in mortar and found that it worked. The reason has nothing to do with performance. The reason is that no corporation manufactures cordwood, and a material without a manufacturer does not get a vote in the code that governs your house. In 1885, a farmer in Door County, Wisconsin, stacked short cedar logs in lime mortar, built 4 walls, put a roof on top, and moved his family in before the first snow. The walls were 16 inches thick. The cedar came from trees he cleared to plant crops. The mortar came from lime he burned from local stone. The total material cost, in today's money, was less than what you will spend heating your house this winter. That building is still standing. 140 years, same walls, same mortar, same cedar log ends, facing the Wisconsin wind. The farmer who built it has been dead for a century. The walls have not noticed. The average American home built last year will need its roof replaced in 20 years, its siding in 25, and its framing inspected for moisture damage in 30. The farmer's wall has needed none of these things, and no government agency, no university laboratory, no building code committee has ever published a comprehensive study asking why. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how a wall made from firewood outperforms the insulation in your house, who benefits from making sure you never find out, and how a man in upstate New York spent 35 years proving it works, while the building code pretended he did not exist. You will also learn the legal exemption that exists in 44 states that lets you build one anyway. Stay until the end, because that exemption is the only reason hundreds of these homes exist in America right now. The method is called Cordwood Masonry. In parts of Wisconsin, they call it stackwall. In Quebec, they call it bois cordé. In Scandinavia, where the oldest examples stand, they do not call it anything special. They just call it building. The engineering is so simple, it feels like it should not work. That reaction is worth examining, because it reveals more about what you have been taught to expect from construction than it reveals about the method itself. You take a log. Cedar is best because it resists rot, but pine, spruce, and fir all work. You cut it to the length of your desired wall thickness, 12 inches for a mild climate, 16 for a cold one, 24 if you want a wall that does not acknowledge winter exists. You debark it and let it dry for at least a year. Green wood shrinks, dry wood stays. You lay a bead of mortar along the outer edge of your wall line. You lay a second bead along the inner edge. Between the 2 beads, you leave a cavity. That cavity gets filled with insulation, sawdust, and lime, vermiculite, cellulose, whatever is cheap and local. Now you press your log ends into the mortar, one by one, cut face out on both sides. You fill the gaps between logs with more mortar. You repeat this process row by row until you reach the height of your wall. That is the entire method. A child can learn it in an afternoon. A family can raise a wall in a week. The tools required are a saw, a bucket, a trowel, and time. But the engineering inside that simple wall is doing something that most modern construction cannot do at any price. It is providing 2 thermal properties simultaneously. Every building material has a primary thermal behavior. Fiberglass insulation resists heat transfer. It slows the movement of energy from one side of the wall to the other. That is all it does. It cannot store heat. It cannot release heat on a schedule. It is a static barrier. Concrete and stone store heat. They absorb energy when the sun hits them and release it hours later when the temperature drops. That is thermal mass. But concrete and stone are poor insulators. Heat moves through them relatively quickly. Modern construction forces you to choose insulation or mass, resistance or storage. You get one. A cordwood wall gives you both. The log ends are wood. Wood insulates. Cedar runs approximately R value 1.25 per inch of thickness. A 16-inch cordwood wall delivers roughly R value 20 from the wood alone. With the insulated cavity between the mortar beads, the effective R value reaches R value 22 to R value 25. That matches or exceeds a standard 2x6 fiberglass wall. But the mortar between those log ends is dense and full of mass. Dense, heavy, capable of absorbing thermal energy during the day and releasing it through the night. The same flywheel effect that makes rammed earth and adobe work is happening in the mortar joints of a cordwood wall, while the wood around it insulates. The wall insulates like fiberglass and stores heat like stone. At the same time, in the same structure, built from trees that fell in a storm and mortar mixed in a wheelbarrow. Owners of cordwood homes across Wisconsin and Minnesota report heating costs 50 to 70% lower than their neighbors in conventional frame houses. Same climate, same winters, same square footage. One house wrapped in fiberglass bats stapled between 2x6 studs. The other built from cedar log ends and lime mortar by the family that lives in it. One man saw all of this clearly enough to spend his career trying to change it, and the building code outlasted his patience. Rob Roy held a doctorate. He could have built a conventional career in academia. Instead, in the late 1970s, he started building with cordwood. In 1981, he founded the Earthwood Building School in West Chazy, New York. His own home, Earthwood, is a 2-story circular cordwood structure with an earth roof built into a hillside. The walls are 16-inch cedar log ends set in lime mortar. The thermal mass of the mortar and the insulation of the wood work together with the earth sheltering to create a home that requires minimal heating through upstate New York winters. He has lived in it for over 40 years. For 35 years, Roy taught over 1,000 students how to build cordwood structures. He wrote the definitive texts, Cordwood Building, The State of the Art, and the complete book of cordwood masonry, House Building. They became the most widely referenced cordwood construction documents in the world. He published thermal data. He documented fire resistance. He photographed standing structures across Wisconsin and Quebec that had survived a century of winters without maintenance. He submitted this evidence to code review bodies. He advocated for cordwood to receive the same evaluation that every manufactured material receives automatically by virtue of having a corporate sponsor. The response was not rejection. Rejection requires examination. The response was silence. No hearing was scheduled. No technical review was initiated. No committee was formed. In 2021, Cobb Construction received Appendix U in the International Residential Code. Cobb has no published thermal testing as extensive as what Roy documented for cordwood. In 2024, hempcrete received Appendix BA. Hempcrete has been used in modern construction for a fraction of the time cordwood has been standing in Wisconsin. Both received code recognition. Cordwood, with 130 years of standing proof and a library of published construction data, received nothing. Roy's evidence was not rebutted. It was not acknowledged. It was not even read. Rob Roy spent 35 years building proof that cordwood works. The code spent 35 years not looking at it. He is still alive. The code still does not contain the word cordwood, and earthwood is still warm. The University of Manitoba Department of Civil Engineering conducted thermal performance testing on cordwood wall assemblies. The research confirmed that cordwood walls provide simultaneous insulation and thermal mass properties, with effective R values reaching R20 to R25 depending on wall thickness and cavity fill. The mortar matrix demonstrated measurable thermal lag, absorbing heat during peak hours and releasing it during cooling periods in the same daily cycle documented in rammed earth and adobe construction. That research has never been cited in a code update proceeding at the International Code Council. Never. Oak Ridge National Laboratory has published extensive data showing that thermal mass walls outperform their rated R values under real-world cycling conditions by 40 to 90%. A wall rated R13 in the laboratory delivered energy savings equivalent to R25 in the field. The R value metric, designed under steady-state conditions by the insulation industry, systematically undercounts every wall that stores heat. Cordwood stores heat. The metric was not designed to measure what Cordwood does. That data has never been applied to Cordwood in any proceeding at the International Code Council. No proposal for Cordwood inclusion has ever been submitted to the International Code Council, because no institutional body has funded the research package required to support one. The research that does exist sits in a university archive in Manitoba. The code committee that could act on it has never opened the file. The International Code Council is a private, non-profit organization headquartered in Washington, D.C. It writes the International Residential Code, the document that governs what you are allowed to build in all 50 states. Its corporate members include the Portland Cement Association, the American Wood Council, the American Chemistry Council, Owens Corning, and USG Corporation. These organizations represent a combined domestic revenue exceeding $40 billion per year. They do not fund the International Code Council out of civic duty. They fund it because the ICC's output directly determines which materials are legally required in American residential construction. Their membership gives them a vote in the process that writes the rules their competitors must navigate to enter the market. Cordwood requires no Portland cement. It requires no engineered lumber. It requires no manufactured insulation. It requires no product made by any ICC corporate member. A family with a woodlot, a bag of lime, and a wheelbarrow can build a wall that outperforms every material those corporations sell. That family does not have a vote in the ICC. That family does not have a lobbyist, and so that family does not have a building code. The financial system enforces what the code establishes. A home without a code-recognized wall system cannot receive a standard building permit. Without a permit, it cannot be appraised at structural value. Without an appraisal, no bank will write a mortgage. Without a mortgage, the only people who can build with Cordwood are those who can pay cash. A wall that costs almost nothing to build becomes accessible only to those who least need to save money. Insurance follows the same logic. Underwriters classify Cordwood as non-standard construction. Premiums increase or coverage is denied entirely. The wall that has stood for 130 years in Wisconsin is treated as a greater liability than the frame wall that needs replacing in 30 years. Stand in front of a Cordwood home in northern Wisconsin. It is January. The temperature is 8 degrees below zero. The wind is coming off Lake Michigan with nothing between you and the water but flat, frozen farmland. The air hurts your face in the way that only Great Lakes winter air can. A cold so dry it feels like it is removing something from your skin rather than adding to it. The house in front of you was built in the 1970s by a couple who had never constructed anything before. They learned the method from a book. The cedar came from their property. The mortar they mixed themselves. The wall is 16 inches thick, and you can see the log ends from where you stand. Hundreds of circles of pale cedar set in gray mortar, each one a cross-section of a tree that was alive when their grandparents were young. You step inside. The first thing you notice is the silence. 16 inches of solid wood and mortar stop sound the same way it stops temperature. The highway you could hear from the driveway disappears. The wind disappears. What remains is a quiet that settles into your shoulders before you register it in your ears. The air is warmth. Not the dry, forced warmth of a furnace pushing heated air through metal ducts. A warmth that is already in the room, radiating from the walls themselves. The mortar joints between the log ends have been absorbing heat from the wood stove and the south-facing windows all day. Now, at 4 in the afternoon, with the sun dropping and the temperature outside falling toward -15 by midnight, the walls are beginning to release that stored energy back into the room. Press your palm flat against the wall, not your fingertips, your whole palm. The cedar is cool to the touch. The mortar between the logs is warm. You can feel the two thermal systems working side by side under your hand. The wood insulating, the mortar radiating. Two materials doing two different jobs in the same wall, built by two people with no construction experience, from trees that grew on the land the house sits on. The heating bill for this house last winter was under $400. The neighbors in conventional frame construction paid over $1,800. Same county, same winter, same square footage. One house built from manufactured materials shipped from 3 states away. The other built from cedar and lime by the people who sleep in it. Outside, 8 below zero. Inside, 68 degrees. The difference between those two temperatures is being maintained by log ends and mortar joints that have been doing this work since the year the couple's children were born. No system upgrade, no replacement parts, no service call. The wall does not have a warranty because it does not need one. It has been tested by 50 Wisconsin winters and has not yet found one worth complaining about. There is one more thing the code ignores about this wall. It resists fire better than the wall the code approves. A conventional wood frame wall is built from dimensional lumber spaced 16 inches apart with air cavities between them. In a fire, those cavities act as chimneys. Air feeds the flame. The fire races through the wall cavity faster than it burns through the surface. This is why frame houses can be fully engulfed in minutes. A cordwood wall has no cavities. The log ends are embedded in solid mortar. There is no air channel for fire to travel through. When flame contacts a cordwood wall, the exposed log ends char on the surface. The mortar between them acts as a fire break. The fire cannot jump from one log end to the next through solid calcium and sand. It chars the surface and stops. A 16-inch cordwood wall with mortar matrix is more fire-resistant than the standard 2x4 frame wall that every building code in America approves without question. The code classifies both as combustible construction. It makes no distinction between a hollow wall with air channels and a solid wall with mortar fire breaks. That distinction is not architecturally complex. It was never made. 44 states in America have owner-builder exemptions. If you are constructing your own primary residence, you can build without meeting the full International Residential Code in most jurisdictions. This is the same legal pathway that allows earthships in New Mexico, Adobe in Texas, and Cobb in Oregon. Rob Roy taught over 1,000 students at Earthwood across 35 years. Richard Flatow, one of the most prolific cordwood builders in Wisconsin, built his own cordwood home, published Cordwood Construction, Best Practices, and now teaches the method to a new generation of owner-builders. Between Roy's students, Flatow's workshops, and the independent builders who learn from their books, cordwood homes number in the hundreds across Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, New York, and Ontario. They were built by families who learned the method in a weekend and raised their walls in a single season. Each one stands in a climate that tests construction harder than any laboratory simulation. Material cost for the walls is near zero if timber was available on the property. Even purchased as firewood, a full cord of cedar costs $200 to $400. The walls of a 1,500 square foot home require roughly 10 to 15 cords. Total wall material cost is $2,000 to $6,000. A conventional framed wall for the same home costs $30,000 to $50,000 in lumber and insulation alone. The method is documented. Rob Roy's books are in print. Richard Flatow's guide is in libraries. The historic structures in Wisconsin are open to anyone who wants to drive up and press a hand against a wall that has been standing since the decade the Statue of Liberty was built. The physics has not changed. The code has not changed either. But the owner-builder exemption means the code does not have to change for you to build. The building code does not prohibit cordwood masonry. It does something more efficient. It does not mention it. 1,000 years of construction history across 2 continents, exposed to the harshest winters the Northern Hemisphere produces, and the document that governs what 330 million Americans are allowed to build treats it as if it does not exist. Not rejected, not failed, not evaluated, simply absent. As if no one ever stacked a log in mortar and found that it worked. As if the walls in Wisconsin are not still standing. As if the warmth inside them is not still real. The cordwood wall solves the problem of heating, but there is a second problem the building industry buried even deeper: your roof. Your roof can be a living layer of earth and vegetation that insulates, absorbs rainwater, lasts centuries, and costs almost nothing to install. The Scandinavians who built cordwood walls also built sod roofs. The modern roofing industry generates $42 billion a year in the United States alone. They buried the sod roof the same way the International Code Council ignored cordwood. If this is the first time you are hearing about cordwood masonry, subscribe. Because the building industry has not just buried one method, it has ignored dozens. And we are just getting started.